Why is it so hard to think of a starting point for this?
I don't know. I almost thought maybe we could just go off what we just did. just use that because I got nothing. Oh man! So
okay, well,
are we breaking up with season 2, and that's why it's weird to start this whole thing?
I guess. Well, the thing was, like, at the end of season 1, we ended it by talking to illustrator Vince Sunico, and you and I were both kind of like riding high on that, going, okay, we're going to talk to Vince, and then we're going to go right into our finale, which I realized in hindsight, I had the wrong mic turned on that entire 2 episodes, which is why I sound like horse shit for those 2 episodes.
At least you didn't look like horse shit.
Well, it's because no one saw it. No one saw it. We didn't.
It's true. You couldn't see. Like, we actually did everything in our underwear in season 1, and you had no idea.
I was going to say, we jokingly said that we are naked from the neck down, and that.
Yeah, we were COVID meetings, but like we didn't even do the nice top thing. It was just underwear the whole time.
Yes, the finest though. It was like Egyptian cotton underwear, if I remember correctly. You know, thread count was off the charts. At least 1,000 thread count, yeah, minimum, or 4,200. I don't even know what a high thread count is. I'm a teacher. I live in squalor over here. I got nothing. You fart through that underwear, it'll not escape. That's how many threads you have.
We have 5 threads. They're 5 really big threads, and they're the whole thing.
Well, I know that's not the way I would usually start a conversation, but it's so fun to think that we've been through 2 years of this already, 2 seasons, and overall we've produced, I mean, well over 140 produced things, right? Like,
I mean, this is technically 93, but that's only the mainline episodes. We have done a lot between the side stitches and the brand new Pop Culture Legends we did this season. So, yeah, I would say easily over 140, if anyone's counting. And one day there'll be a podcast that adjusts that number for inflation after we've come and gone, and we've stopped doing it for everyone.
Once we've passed on in our advanced age, which is our mid-30s, but hey.
I mean, given how this episode started, it could be any day now.
Yeah, right.
There's a reason why Mark usually writes things down for us to get things going for episodes. And
Very
today
true.
we're like, yeah, we'll wing it. It'll be fine.
Yeah. There's officially no outline for this episode, which is right away where I think, like, man, we're in trouble. But, you know, believe it or not, if you remember this, Joe, like in season 1, we did keep our they're not scripts, but they're outlines. Like, we outlined a majority of that season. We did get away from it for like 10 episodes, I think, in there. Yeah. And it was like heavy conversation based. But yeah, you're right. Like, we've always had an outline of some kind, except for that little gap. And it does feel naked a little bit,
A little bit, yeah.
Not to use it.
Not to have that.
Real naked.
Naked, yeah. Because, I mean, this is definitely something we would not do when we had guests. If we were to fly, free ball style and just, fancy free, it would probably be bad, and we would probably have only had like one guest. And the word would have quickly spread, don't go on their show. They have no idea what they're doing.
They're just buck naked the entire time, guys. It gets awkward because they stare at you. They stare at you the whole time.
There's nothing but eye contact, which is really weird because it's intense. There's 2 of them.
Yeah, I don't break it, man. Samuel L. Jackson the whole time. Yeah. Well, we might as well start where we began with season 2, which felt like without editing it, it was like 2.5 hours of full on fangirling between you and I with Noah Watts, who the guy is so damn cool. He's so much fun to engage with, and I mean, Joe was so okay. I had Josh Sawyer in season 1 where I could barely get words out.
Yep.
How was Noah Watts for you? Because you were on the line with him before I got there. Like how was that?
It was. I've brought it up before with the comparison. I think where it was basically Donald Glover, the Childish Gambino's character in Community when he meets LeVar Burton, and I was just trying to not say something stupid. I got further than he did because he didn't say anything to LeVar Burton the whole episode because he just wanted an autographed picture because you can't disappoint an autographed picture. And I had that in the back of my mind for what felt like one whole hour before Mark showed up. And that was like, it was like 3.5 minutes. I think Mark was having some issues with his computer getting going. And it was just us talking about, hey, I'm the other guy in the podcast that you haven't been talking to, but big fan. And I'm sure it was very awkward. Oh, thank you. By the way, he went over asking is it okay to use his video? I think he was staying in a hotel at the time. He was traveling for I think his band. I think he was traveling with his band at the time. So he was just running hey, it's just a it's a hotel. I am not in anything worth seeing right now. I'm we don't do the video thing. We don't think we're going to do the video thing. And then we did the video thing. But no, it was just I was 100% afraid that we were going to Orson Welles it right there. And that was going to be the peak and the pinnacle. And we would just go downhill from there because that's in my mind. We talked to Noah Watson, we made it. Dude was at the time the most prolific voice actor we had talked to, and just kind of the biggest actor I think we had talked to yet on the podcast. Actually, no, I take that back. Probably not the biggest actor. I don't want to take that away from other people we've had on the show, but yeah,
I think I know what you're saying because as far as connections go. I mean, the actors that we've talked to on the show historically, I mean, yeah, we've loved their work. We're obviously fans of these folks. Otherwise we wouldn't have them on. But when it came to Noah Watts, you and I had both spent quite a bit of time playing his character in a video game.
Yes.
And me at first was the mandatory 12 hours to get through it and then move on with my life. But then I went back and replayed it 2 more times. And you obviously spent much more time playing it than I did. So it was I don't know. I don't know if it just felt more personal in a way to connect with him because talking with him helped me see these other things that I just had never known about him. And so, yeah, as you mentioned his music and seeing just how passionate he is about what he does, that really kind of transformed that whole conversation for me. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And then on top of that, the whole fact that, he has his own Twitch stream, so he has his own gaming network that he's doing. So that's just another thing that was there for us to bond with him over is just playing video games. Not only has he been in one of at least my favorites of all time, and will remain that way for forever. But the fact that we can just bond over the fact that we've played the same games as each other, we've had similar frustrations and those same victories that have felt really good. So that was just an incredible way to start season 1 off. Season 2, season 1, there was a hectic we're going to record 5 episodes in one night, Gone in 60 Seconds style, a one night boost, and then put it all out there for you to consume. This was different for season 2.
Yeah, season 2 felt a little bit measured because we didn't have that necessity of having to put out 5 episodes like you mentioned. And I remember that was actually pretty taxing for us since we had never done it before. And now we come into this season where it's we had actually recorded the retro review first and then we interviewed Noah. So we kind of, we had the ability to kind of go, okay, we got a couple banked here now to start the season at least. But it was such a different feeling because for those that actually listened to us for season 1, which we appreciate you doing that if you tuned in for that, it wasn't a bad season by any means. At least my mom says it wasn't. But it was.
At least your mom listened.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, right. Well, but it was unique because in season 1 we did a lot of outreach to guests to come on, and we had this problem where everybody kind of got back to us at the same time. So then we ended up having okay, we need to make sure we create time for people, give enough time to feature them, right? And it felt it's holy shit, we've got 8 people, 10 people to talk to, and we've only got 4 months of runway left. It would feel ingenuine just to throw stuff out there, but this time around we actually were able to organize it and feature people appropriately. And so, yeah, it was just really fun too to relive Assassin's Creed 3 now that I have good nostalgia for it as opposed to what I had the first
when you first left it.
Yeah.
But no, and like again, like I mean, stuff that you didn't even get to hear. Well, I mean, before we get to that, like him talking about his music career, and if you haven't like actually taken the time to listen to his music, please get out there, listen to his stuff, what he's done with Nichols and Bones, and I just like I don't know, like just enjoy it. Like again, it has that very like 70s, like 60s rock blues feel to it that's just easy, just kind of like just melt into, where you can just kind of like, I'm sorry, you can like turn the lights off in your room, close your eyes, and you can just like be with the music. And that's kind of like that's what I've done with this album. It's just that enjoyable to listen to, where I can actually like get rid of everything else in my environment and just enjoy his music while it's on.
I was describing this to a friend where I said, hey, listen to his music. And they go, okay, well, how do you describe it? And I said, okay, imagine if like you dove into a vat of like tie-dye, but then suddenly there's like a chainsaw there, but you're fine with it, you know? And then that psychedelic feel is like consistent throughout it. But then you get these edges of other sounds that kind of come in and take over, but they're not the whole track. It's like they rise and fall. And so I really appreciated that, and I listened to the album too. Like well, not just his album, but his YouTube channel, all that stuff. Like you can really get lost in his music, and I love it. Yeah,
and if you haven't like follow at Noah Watts on Instagram, on his YouTube channel, and he's been coming up with new music. He's working on stuff right now. We actually were hoping to get him back for the end of the season. I think we're going to try and get him again for season 3 to talk about other things other than just his career, but just getting his opinion on different movies and properties. But yeah, he is in like, you know, the neck deep of creation right now with his music. And if you know if you listen to that episode, you know, that is his passion right now. That is where he wants to be. So, very excited to see what comes from there, and wish that we could have had him in like some sort of live show where everyone who listened to the episode could have stuck around, because I think we stayed and talked like another hour after we were done recording with him. I just like a bit of everything. And that's like a bit of, you know, just his life in Montana, his life creating music, his life acting, just everything. And I'm excited to hopefully one day maybe drive to Montana and have a beer with Noah Watts, because that's
man.
Like the next like life goal.
Yeah, friend of the podcast. We absolutely love Noah Watts, and as we kind of reflect on this past season, we're not going to go through like all 44 episodes. There's not enough time for that. But one of the things that kind of took over pretty much every conversation with my family this season was getting the chance to sit down with Danny Woodburn. Yeah. And to this day, my dad still asks me about how Danny Woodburn's doing. I'm like, Dad, I'm sure he's fine. I'm sure he's great. Just look at his social media. He's dancing, he's laughing, he's doing all kinds of fun stuff. But obviously, you probably know where I'm heading with this. And it was the fact that he had every one of us rolling with this story about Arnold Schwarzenegger and the guy that feeds him candy on demand. Candy! I still can't believe that. One of the funniest damn things I've ever heard. Because just imagine, you're on that set for the first, because like Danny mentioned, he'd been in features and everything. He'd been in several big films, and like, this was one of those big films where like you're just sitting there, you're wanting to make sure you nail your part, and then suddenly Arnold just yells, "Dunce,
Dunce,
candy,
candy."
Guy scurries in, feeds him, and runs off. It's like,
I just imagine this guy like popping, like unwrapping it as he's running, and then just popping it right into Arnold's mouth as he got to him, and then takes off running. And then I'm trying to like, this guy, how is Arnold going like delivering lines with hard candy in his mouth?
There's no way he's enjoying it and savoring it. He's like chewing through that, you know, just a kid with a cough drop.
You know, just there. Which, I mean, if that's how you enjoy your candy, I mean, who am I to deny like a 6-time Mr. Universe champion how he enjoys his hard candy? But
steroids or no. Yeah. But the other thing too, though, this was a really good chance for us to obviously sit down with like a legend of TV and film at this point, but it was also a really fun opportunity for us to kind of gather what became known as the Dissectors, which is like our little crew of, you know, of you and myself, my brother, then our good friend Doug Eberly that has helped us out with a couple of topics now.
Yes, a new dad, Doug Eberly, by the way.
He's definitely in that parenthood stream that I've been in for the last 5 years. So good luck, Mr. Eberly. We thank you. Yeah, but seriously though, like that became kind of fun. It's almost like an event now. Whenever we have someone on this show, we all get together, we all plan, we all throw some questions out there. Yeah. Fun stuff happens. I mean, I almost expect it now.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's kind of like we have had this opportunity of being able to make friends as we went along on this podcast. So that is with our guests that have come on the show or people who have been giving us advice on how to just produce the show. And speaking of our good friend Doug, he wouldn't be seeing our faces if it wasn't for Doug. He's the one who told us to do this. And so, I mean, he wasn't like, put your fucking faces on there, guys. You have no idea what you're doing. It wasn't like it wasn't a threat. It was definitely a suggestion. Like, hey, this is the way to go for podcasts. Like, you need to get your faces out there. The content's great. You guys are fun. You need to do this to level up. So, like, being able to take, that experience of meeting someone who helped our podcast out, and then we got the opportunity to meet someone from a property that we were in love with as children and growing up, and we were able to invite Doug into this so he could meet someone from the property that he has, made part of his internet livelihood off of. I mean, I doubt, soup posting with bread is paying the bills these days, but he is well known in his internet community. So I think it was just great that he's done something to help us out, and we were able to repay that in some way, shape, or form, and that we've been able to do that with a few others on this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, getting to meet Doug Eberly in season 1, and then getting to invite him back. I mean, that's almost just as fun as meeting with any friends for, dinner or whatever, and the same thing goes for like the after party, because he actually messaged me one night. We were just kind of chatting back and forth, and he said to me, it's just as I'm almost waiting until the mic is turned off, because that to me is the stuff that I don't get to do as much anymore. Like I don't get to do this with my friends as much. And so he looks forward to when we stop recording. And I went, if this was the me of like 15 years ago, I might take that personally, but now I'm like, no.
No, it's the after part.
I know what you mean.
Fine.
I know what you mean. That's great, So just like I said in season 1, turn the lights down low. It's an Eberly night, and I can't wait until we get to talk with him again. Yeah.
I'm excited for Doug's, I think, 4th episode.
I think so.
We've had him on 3 times so far.
Yeah.
Yep.
And every one of those episodes with him, guaranteed the camera was running for probably 2 hours, and the camera wasn't running for probably 2 hours. So I mean, it's an event, man. It really is. Yeah. But speaking of events, as we love our asides or our tangents and topic shifts, this year we did do something a little bit different that we hope you've noticed, unless you rotate one out of every 4 episodes is what you're here for, and that's fine.
That's okay. It's your thing. We're not judging. Listen to us.
The retro reviews, man. That was fun as shit to do this year.
So this was, I would say, of our 2 newer content things that we did, this was the one that, like, I mean, it fit nicely. I know it fit nicely, but it felt more snug into the package as to one that we'll talk to you in a bit. But no, they were a lot of fun, and we started, like we mentioned, with Assassin's Creed 3, and that one, I think you could tell, was definitely the first one of those we'd ever done, because when you listen to them further, like you get to like even like number 2, like, you know what? Maybe we don't discuss the whole plot of the game anymore. That does take up a good chunk of the time. So we definitely got better at reviewing as we went along.
There's a lot of content in that first retro review, which is fine. And once again, these are games that we're passionate about, but then maybe subconsciously we're like, okay, maybe we don't put out 2 hours on every game, but that's fine. Like that's where we began it. And then as we went, I had so much fun going back and looking at details that I maybe overlooked, or revisiting a game I hadn't played in 10 years or 15 years, whatever. And I really started enjoying stuff that I even lost a little bit of, and which is like the whole point of this show is like help people rediscover things that we live through. And that retro review is like a straight up, like you're connecting to the vein and you're getting right back to it, man.
Well, I mean, it's even the thing. I think it's hopefully fun for the audience, and we thank you again for listening every time that you do. And we hope that maybe you have picked up some of the games that we talked about. But I mean, that's part of what we do is we pick up the games and replay them a little bit before we talk about them and record for them. So that was fun. Just like, picking up Donkey Kong Country. have not played that in decades. And then when back for the review, it's like, hell yeah, Donkey Kong Country, let's do this. That was definitely something that was landmark for the Super Nintendo. We had gone from a lot of 2D, very you could tell this was a step up from the Nintendo, but the Donkey Kong Country was 2 steps up from the Nintendo with what it looked like and what it was able to do with its 3D graphics. So that was just fun, getting that frickin' one, just listening to the theme again as you start playing through.
Oh my God,
music was perfection in that game. So being able to listen to that soundtrack again as you just went through on your Rhino, rampaging through things, jumping on your frog, which having to relearn the jumping and hopping of the frog. Yeah. Don't know if I was ever good at that, but I definitely am not good at it now. Did tell you that?
Totally different from any of the other animals you ride in that game. And it's the one you have the least control over. And it's also in the shittiest levels to have to use it.
Yes, it is.
That's the combination of that. And
and the mine carts, again, that was the mine carts. I don't hate them. And as frustrating they are, I think that's kind of the best part of it is that they were the perfect challenge for the Super Nintendo, because they were the great amount. They were this perfect amount of frustrating with able to actually accomplish the goal. It was not difficult for the sake of being difficult. It was just difficult, and you could pull it off. It wasn't annoying like the Lion King on the Sega Genesis.
No,
it wasn't making the mistake of going PvP at 3 a.m. in North America when it's just all of Asia playing, and oh God, no, I'm not, not winning, yep, shouldn't be here.
Yeah, Donkey Kong Country definitely feel like Shigeru Miyamoto is just holding your shoulders behind you, and he's like, you've got this. We made this part difficult on purpose. You're gonna get through. Yeah, it's gonna be fine. Yeah, Papa Miyamoto's got you. Okay. And yeah, man, that was a fun one to revisit. And what was actually another fun thing to revisit for me several times on this show has been Star Trek. In multiple different ways, whether it's the movies, the TV show, got a chance to do a little bit of that. And this year, though, we had the opportunity to actually connect with someone directly from the Next Generation.
Yeah.
And
Next
Lisa
Generation, and don't forget Lower Decks. She was in, I think, 2 episodes of Lower Decks.
Yes. She's a captain now, which, for those of you that are Star Trek nerds, you'll notice I screwed up her actual rank in the intro. I called her Commander. She's Captain. Commander and Captain are very different things in that show.
They are.
Even though people call captains commanders on that show, but that's not their official rank. And so, I screwed that up. But either way,
there were worse things we could have done. Man. Which I have to say, that was, again, just an example of what was, I think, an incredibly comfortable and fun interview. And I know we've talked about this personally a few times, because at this point in time, I still don't think we didn't have video yet with hers. So what you couldn't see while we were doing this, because we kept our video on the whole time. And that way she's able to see us and we were able to see her. And we do that a lot with guests because it just tends to be more comfortable when you've got a face to, to put to a voice. It's not just, a picture that's static and hanging out there. And what you don't see is that about halfway through that interview, she actually asks for a second, and she goes from sitting down to actually kind of like laying down and getting more comfortable. And just like, it goes from, I think maybe in her mind, it went from like, hey, this is going to be like a standard rigmarole interview. It's going to be what I've done who knows how many times by now. And then it was like, you know what? Let's shoot the shit with these guys. They seem to be having fun. I'm having a good time. And we got to see her relax a little bit. And I think that was something that was just fun to experience. And being able to be with someone who had that like shift in mindset and opened up a little bit more and had more fun as things went around. And I think that's partly because, one, not our looks. We did not make her any more comfortable by having our faces here necessarily. But because like we would have like, hey, we shared the outline with her so she knew it was coming up. But like there were several times we were able to expand on things and just like kind of like, I can't think of the best way to put it. We went off the beaten trail, but we still stayed on what was clearly like a footpath. Because like being able to talk more about like just motorcycling in general, I think was fun with her.
I think Alicia Naff is the guest you spent the most time talking to about motorcycles on this program. Like,
bar none.
which before that episode, if you'd asked me that question, like who do you think would have talked the most about motorcycles, I wouldn't have picked Alicia Naff. But that was to your point, though. It's the difference between an interview and a conversation. Like we call them interviews. That's what they're tagged as, whatever. Yeah. But it's a conversation. We're not just trying to like you mentioned, ask them the same question they've already said 10 times. It's like, no. We want to actually talk to you about your life a little bit and the things that happened before you got into the business and all that stuff. Yeah. And with her, it was like, we got to hear all kinds of life stories and stuff that frankly, I just think fans kind of forget about. It's like, this is a person. People tell stories. That's how we bond with each other.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think like even like that motorcycle conversation, the fact that spawned off of, I think she said like one of the worst movies she's ever made or seen. The fact that we could take something that she's not particularly proud of in her career, and it turned into something fun. And that we found more things to bond over. Like, obviously, like, the love for Star Trek was there. And then on top of that, the fact that you have the two of us who have the, journalism college experience, and then she actually has legitimate, amazing, incredible journalism experience. And the fact that we got to talk about that with her and figure out more about how, well, she may have gotten her start acting, it was definitely journalism that was able to make it so she could retire and she didn't have to worry about finances anymore.
Yeah. Her career in investigative journalism, I mean, she's one of the best at getting info. I mean, I felt like I could learn from her all day about this stuff. And I really do hope people go back and listen to that one because it's a really fun, in-depth and like layered conversation. I mean, there's a lot going on there, and we did want to be responsible about a lot of it too, because we don't put content warnings on this stuff, it just is what it is. Like we don't necessarily want to wallop you with the topics, but we do want to make sure that like we're going to get into things that you may not be expecting.
And also just the fact that she is just such an awesome human being, the fact that she's got her charity, her drive-by do-gooders, that she's just also very passionate about, and making sure that she's doing what she can to help those who are in a very, very unfortunate place, because she talked about how like the homeless population in California is staggering, and just more needs to be done to help them out, and she's doing everything that she can to do so. Is just phenomenal to hear that's what she's doing with her time now.
So yeah, Alicia Naff, incredibly involved with Skid Row in Los Angeles and the communities that live there. And we really recommend you check it out, everything she's doing, because she has a new story up almost every day about people she's helping, and just hats off to her for what she's done. And we donated a tent to the cause as well, because people need to live in some kind of shelter out there, and a tent's going to help a lot. So
yeah.
I should ask her who she gave it to. It'd be cool to see where it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on top of that, it was not like oddly sponsored tent. Like, it's not like our logo was slapped on it or something weird.
No, nothing like that.
Can you imagine how horrible that would have been?
Oh, God. Yeah, here's your tent provided by Digital Dissection. These thirsty guys that just need you to know who donated this.
No, God, that would be awful.
That'd be terrible.
Nope. It was just a tent that was purchased from Amazon and sent directly to her.
Well, no, I think she actually makes the tents.
Oh, does she make them? Okay. Oh, yeah. You donate so much money, and then she was able to do something with it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She actually creates them, which is just phenomenal. So my hat's off to her, man. She's busting ass taking care of folks out there. But speaking of hardworking people, Joe, the Blue Man in the Tube, Mr. David J. Fielding, Zordon himself. I still can't believe we had a chance to talk to him. Not just about Power Rangers, but about his journey as a military brat, which I really bonded with, obviously, since I am one of those people. But then just to hear about how he looks at like this fight between good and evil that we're kind of living every day, and how he tries to speak to us through his novels in that capacity. And to me, that was one of those interviews, once again, where I had no idea where that was going to end up.
No.
Yeah, it was unique as hell, and hearing that from him it took me back, because when he mentioned how he wanted Zordon to be this almost like this Zeus type figure, you know, like talking down from the clouds type of thing, I don't know how I didn't see that my entire life. I mean, because it makes sense.
Oh, completely.
I went back and watched it with my kid. I'm like, how did I not notice this? 30 years.
Well, I mean, I think 30 years. Like, I mean, granted, like, there is definitely a gap in my Power Ranger watching. Like, I feel really bad, because I almost feel like, I don't know, like a side story here. Like, I went to C2E2 in Chicago this year. One of my cosplays I did was the original Green Ranger. You can see part of it hanging out back there in the background, and I think it was one of the actors, I think from like Lost Galaxy or one of the later seasons, was like, "Hey, I'm a Power Ranger, I'm over here," and I'm like, I don't know you. I'm really sorry. I know that I'm dressed up, and it would appear that I've been a lifelong fan, and to be completely honest, as soon as Tommy left, that's when I left. And so I felt bad. Like, you're from an area where I definitely stopped watching, and it was hard not to. I mean, it gets to a point where like all of your friends kind of move on, and you go from like liking like comic books and like Power Rangers, and then your friends like, no, we just like football and sports, and like, those are cool, but so are comic books and Power Rangers, but I'm not going to talk to you about those anymore. And I stayed with it as long as I could. So unfortunately, I do apologize again publicly and as loudly as I can to the actor who I awkwardly walked away from at a convention. But to that point, like, when you're young and you're watching Power Rangers, like, you're caught up in everything. You're swept up in this cool-looking command center. The fact that there are brightly colored primary colored costumes made out of spandex that have sweet, like, dinosaur shapes for heads, and you've got, you know, teenagers who are older than you, so you look up to them because they're not adults, so they're not stuffy and lame, and they're, you know, bigger than you, so that helps. And then they've got giant, like, you know, robot dinosaurs. Like, I think that just kind of gets you so much as a kid, and sometimes you do miss just how much the actors are putting into it, because you are caught up in just kind of the fantasticness of it all. So when we talked to David J. Fielding, and he mentions this Zeus-like presence that he has, and that's what he went for. I mean, as a kid, you probably didn't see it, but you felt it. But there's just so much other things going on that when you don't really notice it as much as you do until you go back and watch it again as an adult.
Well, when we thanked him at the end of that episode for being a positive influence, not just on social media, but being a positive influence just in general, and his portrayal of characters and all that, that wasn't just something you write down and say, like, no. This is something I believed for a very long time. And I never had a chance to tell him of that, you know, and that's what I'm happy we had a chance to do was tell him how much we appreciate the fact that he says he's a small part of a very big thing. And I'm like, yeah, but you you did that thing very well.
He did.
Yeah.
I mean, and something that I wish we would have, talked to him more about too. Again, that the idea of him being that very positive figure is a part of what made like Power Rangers work so well. Is that he was this like booming supportive figure in the lives of these teenagers, and like that's of the many faults that the rebooted 2017 movie which by the way isn't as bad of a movie as people like to give it crap. It's literally a science fiction breakfast club. It's fun. It is what it is. But when you look at Zordon, Cranston Zordon in that movie, he, not the antithesis of Fielding Zordon, but like he is much more like, I'm stuck in this fucking wall, kids. Listen to me and do the goddamn job. Until like he obviously grows through the movie, and there's a zenith point where like, oh, never mind, this guy really is on our side. But like you never had that with Fielding Zordon. He was always on their side, even if they didn't trust him at first, because we happen to pick teenagers with attitudes, which, looking back on it, a terrible decision in any person's back. Why don't pick teenagers? Pick adults who know what they're doing. Like, don't do that. But
Cranston felt like he was Zordon just for the jokes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I thought about that.
Yep.
But either way, like getting the chance to sit down with him, I really do appreciate it, because not just because of the fact that we're fans of him, but what ended up happening, obviously, near the end of the season when we lost Jason David Frank and he passed away. And I'm not saying like it was good to connect with him just because of that reason, but it was because of the fact we got to tell that story. We got to hear his story and how he rose through the show, but also how he became an author and what he did with that. And to me, that's where like after Jason David Frank passed away, I thought about that. I'm like, man, I never got to spend that time with like JDF, being a fan of him in person, and so I'm thankful for the fact that we got that opportunity and the time that we did get to spend with him. So that was huge. Okay. But something else that was also huge for me in particular, which my brother decided to pull the rug out from under me when we talked to a Mr. Carlos Ferro. I do want to set the record straight, because Nate is known to embellish just as I have on certain things. And when we got to sit down with Dominic Santiago, aka Carlos Ferro, I was not making that up. When I said I named my son after Dominic Santiago, was not a joke.
No.
It was not made up. It was factual. Dominic was my favorite gear, and he was since day one. He was my favorite dude.
I can definitely attest to that. And I would say, if we could say that there's a pre-season of this podcast, which is like, the playing Pokemon Go until 3 a.m, and us just talking, that had come up, I think, at least twice. That how your love for that game, and especially that character, and how that is the source of your son's name. It was not at all what Nathan said.
That's why I was, for what it was a funny moment. Like, I'll give him that.
Yep.
And Carlos even thought it was hilarious, because Carlos was like, you just told this like really heartfelt story, and like it was great. And then your brother just goes, no, that didn't happen. And I was like, it did happen.
It did.
It's like, come on, dude. Seriously? Yeah. But from a narrative standpoint, yes, our conversations do have a narrative to them. And I know that, like, when I've talked to some folks about podcasts on Twitter, they say like, oh man, don't script that stuff. You're going to sound so wooden and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe sometimes the intros can sound wooden for that, but that's because they are scripted.
Yeah.
Like, the narrative we wanted to tell with Carlos Ferro was obviously part of his creative like nature and what he focused on outside of just acting, but also to talk about how the projects he was involved in were critical to the narratives that video games began to tell after the early 2000s. I mean, Gears of War, Assassin's Creed, even Saints Row to an extent, like all those games, they play into that so much.
I mean, not to mention, again, how incredibly fortunate I feel that we got to talk to two actors who came from a period of video games where motion capture and actually acting on set instead of just being in a booth and voice recording, that was new. Like, those two games were like the ones that were blazing that trail. So being able to talk to them about that experience and how one actor had an absolutely phenomenal experience with his other gears and his fellow actors, and how one had to really keep himself from punching people because they were talking on set while they were going through lines and doing things. And I mean, no one ever said he was on the verge of punching anyone, but he was definitely very mad.
Yes,
and
I could
words
feel that.
had to be had. Mm-hmm.
I could feel his anger even for that, like, afterward. You know, it's been over a decade now, and like he's talking about how he's staring a hole through the producers at Ubisoft, and I'm like, you know what, man? It tells you just how much the craft is there. You know, he takes it seriously. Noah came from a family that also, his uncle was an actor, and so he's been doing this a long time, and that's how serious he took it. And I think stuff like that, like things like that from Noah, I think help reinforce the industry, because, as you mentioned, people weren't really doing this a whole lot yet. The studios probably didn't even know they were like critically screwing up the artistic process. Yeah. You know? And so, and to your point too about Carlos, he mentioned how after they delivered the Gears of War scene, Gears of War 2, like, after they got through that, him and John, when they were doing that scene together, John DiMaggio, he said they had to like take some time off because of how emotionally draining it was to film those scenes. Yeah.
Like, on top of one, just like, obviously because of the content and what was going on in the script and what was going on in the story, but like, to kind of help them, like, if you haven't seen like anything on YouTube with the motion capture of Gears of War, you should definitely check that out, because like these guys are like, they actually put on like football pads and like put some weight on them, so that way they can, you know, obviously like there's a difference between like, if you look at the characters and they're in like, you know, 100 pounds of armor, like there's a difference between like having that weight with you and sprinting a certain period, you know, to avoid certain death, versus like, you know, just kind of jogging from one part of the stage to the next. So they wanted to add that bit of, you know, realism to it in any way that they could. So, like, the amount of toll that put on them both mentally and physically, you know, it was a lot for a video game. So, yeah, completely get why they'd have to step back for a little bit.
It's hard for people to experience it as a gamer, let alone as the people who are trying to emotionally reason out, like, your wife is dying in front of you and you have to make a choice. Yeah. Spoiler alert, but yeah. All right, so I don't want to bunch these people together, and there's no disrespect here, but I want to specifically tell a story about how there's 4 people that were very critical to gaming experiences for myself and my brother, and then coincidentally, Joe, you as well. You just didn't know it yet. But there's Al Lowe, the Leisure Suit Larry creator. There's Noah Falstein, who was one of the original LucasArts employees and did Indiana Jones, Fate of Atlantis, and the adaptation of Last Crusade. Then we have Dominic Armato, Guybrush Threepwood himself. And then Gavin Hammond, my favorite man from Florida, who played Kenny in the Walking Dead series. Those 4 people we reached out to independent of each other. Never once mentioned like a uniting narrative between point and click games, 90s, you know, LucasArts and Sierra Online games. And it just ended up that we ended up covering this like really crucial part of PC gaming from like the mid 90s, and then what it evolved into. Yeah. And I mean, I would love to say it was meticulously planned.
No, it was definitely like the equivalent of like opening a cupboard to get one thing, but then like 4 pots and pans fell out and we caught all of them. Like, you know what? We could make a meal with this. This is what we need. We could use all of this. And that's kind of how it came about.
Well, I mean, there is a little bit of an effect here that is fairly season 1-ish with planning it out, because we actually talked to Al Lowe as one of our first guests for season 2, which is why we're kind of talking about Christmas 2021 when we first chatted with him, because it was true. That's when we recorded it. but there was no actual like plan to have all those folks featured, fairly close together. But once we started planning out how we were going to put those conversations out there, it's like, this makes sense. This makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Because like Gavin and Dominic Armato and obviously Noah Falstein, they're all kind of connected from like LucasArts into what LucasArts would become one day, with folks leaving and forming Telltale Games. And so it was really fun to meet all those folks, and then also realize they're just as nerdy as we are.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I always wish that there was also some other weird like hidden food connection among all those guests. Because the fact that we have learned the secret to finding the best legitimate Chinese food in any town you go to from Dominic Armato, yes. I mean, it's a life lesson I'll never forget.
If you haven't listened to that episode yet, Dominic gives a very important thing to look for when you're looking at like Chinese restaurants. Always look for the ones on like Yelp that are rated like 3 out of 5. It is a telltale sign that they're probably more traditional in the food that they make, not high on customer service.
Yes. So by customer service, it does not mean that they're like, fuck off, like we don't want you in our restaurant. It's much more the fact that, the Chinese food that we get here in the United States at most Chinese restaurants is very much catered to our palate. And it is them making food that they think we'll like, as opposed to making actual food that would be served in China. So with me, like, who lived in China for a short period of time, and going there and being like an idiot college student, being like, oh my gosh, the food here is so incredibly different than what I'd expected, because I was an idiot and was totally expecting like Chinese food I'd get from a buffet in China, and that's not the thing at all. It's actually much better in China than it is what we get here. But yeah, the fact that that's now something I can do, like if I want that taste of 2010 that I had when I was in China, I can actually do that if I know what to look for, and that is 3 out of 5 stars, because these people are making food that they know how to make and they like making, that isn't necessarily the food that everyone wants to eat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I trust that now, because I've seen it before. I've seen that there's a restaurant I really love that is based on traditional Korean food. And if you had just gone by the Yelp rating, you would go, I think if you want to like comb through the 4.8s and the 5s, it's like you might miss that.
Yeah.
And after he reinforced that belief, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to permanently add that to long-term memory.
Yes,
it's true.
The exact opposite of Flamin' Hot Cheetos recipes.
Oh God,
for Dominic Armato.
Poor Dominic, eating all those Flamin' Hots.
Oh yes, I think that has to go for anyone who just reviews food at a state fair. It's like, all right, how much of my intestine am I going to lose this year based off of what's there for me? Because it's going to be some sort of snack food or trend that's been deep fried 9 times over and prepared 20 different ways that I get to try and have. So, yep. Yeah. Flamin' Hot Cheetos.
There's not a good way to transition to this one, other than stating the fact that in season 1 and season 2, there were scheduling conflicts that led to a one-on-one conversation. and in season 1, I ended up talking to Lou Temple from Walking Dead fame, because everyone had a scheduling conflict except for myself and Lou. And I'm like, Lou, I know you're working your ass off. We're going to do this now, because I do not want to have to miss the opportunity. And that same thing happened this year, or this season, with Dan Hernandez, who, one of my favorite writers. The guy is hilarious on Twitter, and that was not an opportunity that we were going to miss. And it's my fault, using time zones and these schedulers. You look at it, you think you've done it right, and then someone goes, hey, I meant noon Pacific time, not Central.
Crap. Definitely.
Like,
yeah. I mean, all's well that ends well. Like, both those interviews turned out great. It was, just 2 dudes having a great time is what they were. And it was, I think, again, like, obviously, like, I was not there, but I got to edit them, and I enjoyed listening to them as I did that.
It's like you were there.
I was there spiritually.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel bad for you in that regard. You know, that's got to be awkward, but it was really fun to connect with him because, as I mentioned in the conversation, him and I have been communicating back and forth on Twitter, and I'm not saying I've been able to follow like his entire career, but like I've definitely been paying attention. I've watched almost everything he's written, and the fact that he's going to have an incredible 2023, like like the Koala Man show that they literally got Hugh Jackman for. It's like it's on Hulu, I think, in the next like day or two. It might already be out actually. And I just, him and his writing partner Benji Submit, those guys are just freaking incredible. They're hilarious, they're creative, and you can tell their projects, man. There's a feel to them that I think it's humor that other people don't try. Like it's and I don't think there's a word invented for how unique it is. but I really do appreciate getting a chance to connect with a screenwriter, because we talked about this a little bit in our episode before this, where we've talked to actors, you know, we've talked to people who've been involved with various sides of the stuff the camera sees, right? But we don't get to talk with people behind the camera, you know, who are doing that kind of stuff. And so it's really fun to flesh that out and get into the minds of these people.
Yeah, I also appreciated his process of picking Pokemon for Detective Pikachu, and how it was a mix of what he thought the fans would enjoy who are playing the current generation, the fans of the original generation, as well as him. And that's how and why Psyduck had to be in that movie in some prominence, because he just really likes Psyduck. And who can blame him? Psyduck is this dorky fun. Yeah, great Pokemon. But speaking of things that are, you know, being tried out new or for the first time, something that we did this year is put out a miniseries that was new. And it was new, one, just because we didn't do it at all last year. In season 1, we had Side Stitches, which was just like, hey, there's more we want to talk about in this week's episode, but, you know, we didn't want to be sitting there for 2 hours, so we're just going to have a second episode that's shorter and covers those things too. And we thought, you know what? We're done with those. We think you're done with them. Not really feeling them ourselves anymore. Let's try something new. And that's where Pop Culture Legends got started. Yeah. And it was new in the fact that it had nothing to do with what was also being done that week. It was not like an attachment or a sequel to an episode that was already there. It was stuff that we thought was cool, that didn't quite necessarily fit what we normally talk about. Wasn't necessarily nostalgia stuff, although a lot of it did take place in the past. All of it took place in the past. There's nothing modern about them. But but also they were 100% scripted. So this was us producing content that was completely different than what we're normally doing for you. So looking back at how those went and how those changed, I think this is something that I look forward to bringing back and doing again in some capacity, because it does kind of like spice up the way we deliver content. It's not necessarily, you know, the outlined off the cuff stuff. And I think it's just an opportunity to specifically learn about something as opposed to two guys talking about their experience with it.
Which you might learn something from that.
Yes.
Right? Like you and I, like we remember a lot of stuff that just kind of comes through in the conversation. But I agree with you completely that Pop Culture Legends falls into that space where, imagine if the History Channel was told to you by someone you know, and it isn't just about aliens. Like that's...
Yes. Isn't just about it, because we had one episode that did talk about aliens. Video game aliens. But they were there.
Yeah, video game aliens. But to your point, like, I know this was a tough project. Like, I critically appreciate all the effort that went into it. It's so much different than what we do on the off-the-cuff stuff. And I feel like you and I kind of leveled up in a way, like creatively, mic presence wise, like we went through something making that. And it seems like people enjoyed it because on like YouTube, for example, this series, I just never quite knew what was going to happen from like a response standpoint. And there's like 4 episodes out of that miniseries that ended up popping into our most viewed stuff. And so it was like, okay, so either the topic selection was really good or the presentation was really good or whatever, right? Like
both.
Well, there was something that worked there. I'll put it that way. But it was, that's how I've summed it up to other people though. It's like, imagine if you were basically told something on the History Channel, but it was someone from your generation and you're reliving that together. Like that's what Pop Culture Legends became.
Yep.
So,
So,
a lot of fun.
I think a good way to wrap this episode up and wrap up the season is go over a few standouts that we had this season. So whether it was a pop culture legend, Mark, that stood out to you, or a regular episode that stood out to you, or maybe one of each, whatever you want to do. Let's think of like an episode that really, really hung with you, either while we were making it, or, to this day, months afterwards, or who knows, maybe the last one you did because it was the last one we did is the one that sticks out the most, because that's a thing.
So I'm going to do 2 things. There's 2 things that I want to point out. One of them was Doctor Who Series 1, talking about the Ninth Doctor. I'm not saying that Joe and I have like fallen off or like we were having issues with our morale or anything, but mental health wise, this year has been incredibly taxing on the both of us. Like, I'm not going to try to get into that whole thing, but there's a lot that happened to us. The Doctor Who Series 1, that episode felt like healing to me. It felt like healing to me, Joe, because we laughed just like we did the first time we ever recorded something.
Yep.
We were throwing out accents left and right. we were like belly laughing, and I mean, my face hurt after we recorded that one. Like I had that much fun with it. So that was a major standout for me just because of that.
Yeah.
Like I remember hanging up the headphones and I'm like, that episode made me feel like how I usually do once we've interviewed someone. Like it was that great.
Yeah.
Which I did just realize we forgot to mention Ellen McLean. Also one of my favorite fucking interviews this year. Voice of GLaDOS, nicest fucking lady I've ever met in my life.
I mean, she told the story about how like a big name actor like took her out to dinner with other people of her age at the time, because she was a child, and it was like a hey, these children are in production, I'm going to do a nice thing, take them out to dinner, and then one of the children does in fact set the table on fire. Just great story.
Yeah,
oh
I'm kind of upset we forgot to mention that, but so that's part 1, right? Doctor Who just fucking slayed it for me. The other thing, though, that I'm quite proud of is that this season I saw some things happen with episodes that had absolutely no special guests attached to them, and there became our most listened to content. Which ended up being Van Helsing, the Guild, and then Superman Battle Royale, which compares the 3 cinematic Supermen. Which,
sadly, on a sad note, we'll have to make another one when the 4th one eventually gets out here. Poor Henry Cavill. Oh my God! The whole one of the things that we talked to with Carlos was how he was after the recording was done, how he was labeled the most the unluckiest man in Hollywood. And it's like, well, here you go. He literally quits a job on Netflix because he's told he's getting Superman again, and it's definitely happening. Go ahead, put on your social media, have a good time. We're excited to do this. And then 1 fucking month later. So, about being Superman.
Yeah.
Not happening anymore. But luckily, it's Henry Cavill has not too much to worry about financially. But yeah, he gets Warhammer 40K now, which I'm sure he's going to really love doing. Because, weird just guess that he would enjoy Warhammer 40K. But, yeah.
Yeah. That was completely... I did not see that happening. That took me completely off guard to to see those episodes just kind of fire off like that, it obviously reinforces the fact that clearly our generation found those, because Van Helsing is like part of that early 2000s, mix up of films that were just crazy enough to work.
Yep.
Or not work, depending on your opinion.
Yep.
The Guild literally helped start this like nerd firestorm that still burns today. And then who doesn't love Superman? So fun times.
Oh my gosh.
But what about you? What about you? Let's hear some Joe moments.
Part one, part two. Definitely have to say, one that made me feel quite a bit like the most, we talked about already. And I have to say that, again, my picks do not involve any of our special guests, just because I think the special guests are in their own category. We've been gushing about our opportunities we've had with the guests on the show and how fortunate we feel we've had time with them. And I think this is in its own category right now. So I would have to say that one that really sticks out to me because of the overall mood that it had for us while we were there, kind of like how you talked about how, we've been struggling with mental health for our own reasons this year. I even know, like, I started seeing a therapist, then matched with a therapist on Bumble. That was very weird. But because we had this kind of emotional roller coaster we're going through with our own lives, that's what made the Jason David Frank Green Earth Evil episode really stick out with me, is because it was one where it wasn't even on the radar. We weren't going to touch, after we had David J. Fielding on, there was no plan to do Power Rangers again this season. And then we were actually sated and kind of ready to go with Mythbusters, which ended up becoming the last content episode of the season. That was going to be our episode, but after we heard the news that Jason David Frank had passed away, we felt like this is just something that we needed. Not something that was like, hey, we just need to like push content out there because this is what's going on right now. But it was like, you know what? This is how he was introduced to us when we were younger. And if it is something that you haven't seen yet, I think this is how you should be introduced to him too, because it was part of like the best of that series. And to this day, it's the longest like sequential Power Ranger like episode arc ever. It is, again, in my opinion, like the most like nerve-wracking 5 episodes to watch, because he just comes in and just gives the other Rangers gives them the business 5 episodes straight, like amazingly. So that happens, and we talked about, like, again, how much he really acted for this time, because he basically played 3 different characters for 5 episodes of regular Tommy, the evil Green Ranger, and evil Tommy, and how each one of them were different from each other. So if you hadn't seen it yet, we wanted you to experience that. And if you had, like we did, watched it when you were younger, we felt it was probably something that you needed to feel again in that moment. So we wanted to have that with you, or help you re-experience that. And also, like, the fact that we started off on a pretty somber note, of course, with talking about like about Jason David Frank's passing, but then it eventually leads to the discussion of the Dragon Zord and his missile fingers, and how Mark brings up that it's one of those moments where it's like, oh no, you better call an ambulance, but not for me. It was probably one of the best laughs that I've had all season, not just because of how much I laughed, because of how much I needed the laugh in that moment. And it was just incredible.
Yes. Yes. So I was actually given some feedback from someone who listened to that episode that said, I needed this because I was just as heartbroken as you guys were. And they told me that I laughed at this episode, I cried at this episode, and it was what I needed. And and when I heard that, I'm like, we didn't slap it together, but we didn't plan for it. But the effort was still there, the fun was still there, but we clearly had to address things that were difficult. Yeah. And when people tell you that kind of stuff, you're like, wow, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing this. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just because of how much, like, again, that that actor meant for me in that role, because like I mentioned before, like I came and left Power Rangers because of him. Like obviously I watched it when it first premiered because it was new, it was awesome, it was great, and then he came on and it was even better, and then he left and I was done with the show, and then 2004 hits and my brother like gives me a call at like 4 a.m. saying, "You're never going to believe it, but Tommy's back on Power Rangers." And so, in secret, I started watching Dino Thunder again, because I couldn't tell my friends. But yeah, so then he kept me there and he brought me back because of just the incredible job he did with his character and the passion he had for that role. So that is an episode that's always going to stand out for me, and one that I'll always be proud of that we put together and we made. Part 2 for me would probably be the last 2 pop culture legends that we did. And it's solely because of, like, part of what you probably don't know of the behind-the-scenes stuff for the show is Mark primarily takes care of the pre-production. We then take care of the production together, and then I take care of the post-production. And then Mark also does the marketing, because that is also what Mark is very good at. If there is any way that we could have a teaching portion of this, I would do that because that's what I do. But that's not there. So we work the podcast the way we do. But Mark, if you have not realized yet, and hopefully you have, has been doing a lot of editing himself. So he's been doing basically all the shorts that are put out and put onto our social media. That's all Mark, 100%. It is something that he's been trying to get better at. It is something that I have never attempted and have never tried. I'll probably try sometime here in season 3, but he's been doing a lot of that. So when we put out the pop culture legend on
National Treasure?
National Treasure, there we go.
Yeah.
I did what I normally did, and you would have gotten what you normally would have gotten, but Mark took it and added a little extra to it and put a few snippets in here. And he's like, "Hey, I didn't change. I didn't take anything out that you did. I left it all in there because it was all great. I just added these little things. Let me know what you think." And I looked at it, I'm like, I should have done that. Like that not like a Mark doesn't deserve credit for it, because he absolutely does. It is like, I think I should have probably done that in the first place. I think I'm getting too complacent and I'm getting too like repetitive and machine-like with the way I'm editing and doing the pop culture legends, which I shouldn't, because it is something new. It is something that should change. It is something that should get better each time we do it. And because of that, I put a lot more into our The Mummy Curse of King Tut's Tomb episode.
Killed it, man. Killed it on that.
I appreciate that.
You killed it, dude.
Thanks. It means a lot, because like that is something that I did put a lot of time into. And when you think of time, like this podcast really does help me understand like just how much effort goes into producing these things when you really care about them. Because like regular episodes, they're like an hour and 20 minutes. And I'm editing them for 2+ hours, getting them down to things. And that pop culture legend, it was 12 minutes. I think it was 11 minutes and 50 seconds, or 11 minutes, 49 seconds. I edited that from like 10:30 at night until about 2 a.m. with me just getting it down and doing things. So I did everything I could to make it better, and I'm going to do everything I can to make the next one even better than that. So those are the 2 things that I think I'm going to have with me forever, is just the heartfeltness of one episode, and the pop culture legends being something new, and me being pushed a little bit, whether you're meant to or not.
Well, this is a progression, right? I mean, this is kind of how season 1 for us was a progression too. Like we were learning a lot about ourselves in the beginning, and just trying to get stuff out there. But then partway through that, we realized, okay, we're actually telling history about our generation, and like it kind of became this like, okay, that's actually what's going on here. Because we're not a news podcast. We're not covering new stuff, although JDF was probably the closest to that we ever did. But then we realized, okay, this is the niche we want. This is the area that we want to focus on. We're going to live here now. And we had a lot of fun living there this entire season. And then you throw in Pop Culture Legends, which does something similar, but it stretches further. So I don't know. I like that progression. It was fun. And I feel like like you said, we're breaking up with season 2 now.
Yeah, that's why it was so hard to start the conversation today. Didn't know what to say. It's not you, it's us. We're just done for right now.
Yeah, is it hot in here?
So, man, I know I have a sweatshirt on and all, but no, it still feels really warm. So this is normally where you would get a very, structured and scripted ending, but I don't think we have that up in front of us. So at this point, we are going to close it out by saying thank you so much, everyone, for everything you do and how you continue to choose to listen to us every week, because there are, believe it or not, a lot of podcasts out there. So you being kind enough to pick an hour and a half of your week or more here listening to our Pop Culture Legends 2 really does mean a lot to us. And the fact that we've been starting to see you share our content more really means a lot. And thank you to everyone who has written a review, who has commented on our stuff, whether you have liked it or have been like, hey, you know what, guys? Maybe tell us how you get through this in A Link to the Past, as opposed to just teasing it and how do you get to this room. We appreciate all of that. Or someone pointing out that it was not, in fact, Hound that got killed first in Transformers the movie, and it was Brawl. I'm sorry, they were both Jeeps. I got cocky. So thank you again. I mean, it just shows that you're listening and you're caring and you're doing something. You're interacting with us, and we appreciate that 100%. So continue to leave comments and follow us on your social media of choice. Give us an email at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com, because we do check that. We do get back to you if you send those out. So, until next season, keep on dissecting.